Good afternoon. Welcome to talking about Schoolnet this afternoon. My name is Pam Batchelor. I'm with Digital Teaching and Learning at NCDPI. And with me, I have my colleague Stacy. I'll let her introduce herself.
Hi, everybody. This is Stacy Lovedahl out here in Catawba County, North Carolina, and I am an educator on loan with the Digital Teaching and Learning Division. I'm really excited to be helping out with this webinar this afternoon.
Yes, thank you, Stacy. We're excited to have you. So a couple of logistical things before we get started in our webinar as folks are joining us. We do have the handout section of GoToWebinar has a PDF of the slide deck for today. You can also join it by typing in the bit.ly that's on the screen, or you can go into the chat and you'll see a link to the bit.ly as well. So either way you want to join a copy of the slide deck, you'll definitely need it. It's got a lot of resources in it. This session today, we're going to be talking about lots of different things in Schoolnet. It's kind of a mishmash of some of my favorite things or treasures that you may not know are in Schoolnet. And then we're also going to be sharing any experiences that we have, and we'll probably have about 10 minutes at the end for any general questions you have about Schoolnet. So if there's something I don't talk about today that you're just dying to know, if you want to go ahead and use the questions feature of GoToWebinar to type it in, we will hold the general questions for the end of the webinar. So if you want to be thinking about that. And then we will get started with just a couple of quick poll questions just to make sure everyone can hear us and see my screen okay. So the first one we're going to ask is, can you hear me talking? And hopefully everyone is saying yes, they can hear me. So that's great, because it's really hard to help someone who can't hear you with an audio problem. So I'm glad to hear that. And then lastly, could you see my screen earlier when I was sharing it? So we'll give about 5 more seconds for that. We had about 80 folks registered for today's this afternoon's session. So hopefully those folks will kind of join us again. We know afternoon time is very busy. We do want to take a second to go over a couple of frequently asked questions about our webinars. So for attending today's live webinar, you will receive a CEU certificate for 0.1 CEU. That will be sent within 5 business days after the webinar. So please give me a little bit of time. It's not an automated process. I do have to generate those certificates. It will be sent to the email address you used to register. So if you used a personal email account, make sure you check that email account for your CEU certificate. We do recommend that it's digital learning competency credit. However, your local public school unit has the final approval for each credit type, so make sure you follow your local process. If you're required to submit some justifications or artifacts about how you're using Schoolnet or how this webinar is affecting your professional practice, please do so. And then finally, we have a recent development with GoToWebinar. When you register for the webinar, it did provide you with a link to join. It also provided you with a phone number. If you are using that phone number to call in and not the GoToWebinar app, it will not record your attendance for your name, because the phone number is a generic phone number. So if you use that phone number to dial in, they don't know who is talking or who is present in the webinar. So if you are using your phone to join us today, you need to make sure that you are using the GoToWebinar app. So if you downloaded an app on your phone, that's perfectly fine, and that will record your presence in today's webinar. But just wanted to let you know that the phone number alone does not record who is here. All right, so I have Pam Batchelor, as I noticed, and my contact information is here on this screen. I would like to give you all a moment just to see who's on the webinar. And if you would type in on the questions panel a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and what your role is. I'll give everyone about 30 seconds to do that, and we'll just kind of see who's on the call with us today. And then you have my contact information as well as my Twitter to connect with me. All right, so I'm going to pause just for about 30 seconds. So I'm not going anywhere. All right, so I'm just going to call out the few folks who have graciously kind of given a little introduction. All right, so we have, I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name, Sana, and Sana's here. And then she's here from Mallard Creek High School. And we have Helen here. She's a health science teacher. Nice to have you, Helen. We have Caroline. Caroline's a 4th grade teacher in Graham County. Yeah, we've had a few Graham County folks on our 10 o'clock webinar, so thank you for joining. We have Fatwa who's here. Deborah is here. She teaches 2nd grade in Alamance, Burlington. And we have Tamika's here. She's from Concord, 7th grade English teacher. So Aaron is here, 3rd grade Sampson County. Yay, we've had a few 3rd grade folks join us today. So that seems to be a popular grade today. So and Samira, she's a school social worker. Great to have you. Thank you. And Marissa is joining us too, and she's a math teacher, high school math. So, all right, thank you very much for giving a little bit of information about who's joining us. It's always great to hear who's on the webinar today, so I can kind of pull in some of those examples as we go through. So today's agenda, just like Dorothy's little ruby red slippers here, we have some favorite things. We're going to talk about Go Open NC integration, which actually just happened on Friday. We're going to talk about CTE resources, AIG resources, global educator resources, K2 resources, and then also some released EOG, EOC, and NCFE items. So a little tour of Schoolnet and some of the things that were in there that you may not know about. We're going to get started right with that Go Open NC integration. So if you haven't heard of Go Open NC, it is a new statewide platform that you have access to as educators in North Carolina to share instructional resources and also collaborate with other educators across the state on instructional resources that are supplemental and aligned to North Carolina's Standard Course of Study standards. So if you haven't clicked on the little Go Open NC icon in your Etsy iCloud tray, it looks like the state of North Carolina and it's blue and green. I encourage you to do that. But the really nice thing is that last week we had this integration feature, and now when you search instructional materials in Schoolnet, you will see search results from Go Open NC. So you will see those lesson plans and activities that are in Go Open NC that you can use that are free. And since we use single sign-on with the NC Ed Cloud for both Schoolnet and Go Open NC, you can hop back and forth between the two platforms seamlessly. I do have linked on this slide an integration guide that kind of explains in more detail how you can do everything. But I'm just going to take a minute and kind of show you how it works. So I'm going to be using today the production or live instance of Schoolnet. So I'm going to try to be careful not to show you any actual student data, but I'm using the live instance of Schoolnet because it has all of our items loaded to it, instructional materials as well as assessment items. And since we're going to be digging into items today, we really need that live look. So if you want to open up a new tab, if you are on a device where you can do that, and log into the NC Ed Cloud and get to Schoolnet by clicking on the red house icon, you can do that, or you can simply watch me. This session is being recorded and you will get access to the recording so you can play it back. But I'm going to be going into that instructional materials unit or module on the left side there. And I'm just going to simply type in, and maybe I'm going to look for geometry. And maybe I'm going to go look for high school, since we had a few high school math folks. All right, and so I can see, but just looking by geometry, for 9th grade, we have 138 materials within Schoolnet, which is called NC materials. And then we have 195 materials on GoOpenNC. Now I can go over here under material types and sort these. So maybe I'm just looking for lesson plans. So I'm going to look, and now I have 109 lesson plans on geometry within GoOpenNC. So maybe I'm going to go look, geometry problems, yeah, geometric properties to solve problems. Sounds good. I see a little bit about the resource. I have the ability to save the resource, which is saving it within Schoolnet to like a favorites list. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that heart to do that. I can also build an express test. So this is a really nice feature, and this is kind of how Schoolnet goes hand in hand with GoOpenNC, because GoOpenNC has this openly licensed supplemental materials that we can use in our classrooms, and then Schoolnet could go ahead and, using those aligned standards that it is the lessons aligned to in GoOpenNC, I could build an express test to go along with this lesson plan. So if this lesson plan is good, and then I want to create a quick little formative assessment to check my students' understanding and how successful the lesson was, I can use that build express test, and it's going to ask me to select how many questions I want from the item banks for those particular standards that this lesson plan is aligned to. To actually view the resource, so I'm going to click on this view resource, and it's actually going to open the resource in GoOpenNC. And you'll notice that there's this little iframe at the top. And so I can, looking right at this resource, I can go ahead and add it to my items in GoOpenNC, as well as I could leave a comment on it. I could give it a star rating. I could evaluate it. We have a North Carolina quality rubric built into GoOpenNC, so you can actually evaluate a resource. You can also report it right here too. So if maybe you clicked on the link and nothing worked, there's a little report button there, and you could let us know that that link is no longer working, because as we all know, the internet changes quite frequently, and we don't always catch links that may not always be working. So GoOpenNC is right here, and it's free for you to use. Instructional materials. Any questions about GoOpenNC before we keep moving on to our next little treasure? I will say that GoOpenNC does have K-12 resources. So, you know, for those of you, even though I was showing a high school example, there's definitely lots of things in there for elementary, middle school areas as well. All right, so next we're going to jump in and talk about CTE resources. So this is something that people ask me all the time, are there CTE resources in Schoolnet? And there are. You just have to know where to look. So we have 2 assessment banks of assessment items specifically for CTE. We have the NC CTE Secure for our high school courses, and then we have our CTE_middle bank for middle school courses. These banks are updated whenever the standards change for the course. So each year, CTE updates different standards for different courses. And when they do that, what they do is they actually delete all the items in the item bank for that particular course and then upload a new item bank. So if you've had your standards changed in CTE this year, and you go back and maybe you gave a test in Schoolnet last year and you're looking for some of those items, you won't see them. They'll still exist on the old test that you created, but they'll no longer be in the item bank because CTE does a complete refresh when they have new standards for their new courses. And so the goal is for these new items and the new standards to be updated every year by the summer CTE conference, which is usually in July. Some CTE instructional materials. And those are going to be based on grants that have been done over the last 6 to 7 years. There were a couple of CTE grants where teachers went out into the community and they had a partnership with a local business, and then they wrote some lesson plans about how they could incorporate that local business into their lessons to prepare the students who are working there. So we can go into Schoolnet, and I'm going to go right back into instructional materials. And I need to clear out my filters because Schoolnet does remember the last kind of thing I searched for that time. So this time I'm just going to go in here and filter by subject, and I'm just going to look for career and technical. And I will see the resources. And so if I uncheck that lesson plans, because I had that filter up there, you'll see that we have a couple of thousand materials for CTE, and then we have about 754 resources on Go Open and See for CTE courses. To find those item banks of assessment items that I was talking about earlier, I'm going to go back over to the blue modules on the left, and I'm going to go under assessments, sorry, and I'm going to click on the little briefcase icon for item banks, and that's going to bring up all the item banks in Schoolnet, and we'll be able to see those two CTE banks. The middle bank has about 1,000 items, and then the unsecured bank has about 24,000 items for high school. So I can go in for that high school bank, and using my filters, I can go in and select my standards. And then the way the CTE standards are organized, they actually go right into our courses. So I can go right into, let's see, I want to do animal science. I select that, I save and close, and it's going to filter down for me just to the items for animal science 1. And then I can go back and let me see what I did there. I must have clicked something. Anyway, you can go in and add items and create a test right from those item banks. Any questions about CTE items? All right, then I'm going to keep on. The next thing we're going to talk about is AIG resources. So we do have a couple of groups of instructional materials, again, in Schoolnet that are specific for AIG. So we do have, there was a grant for some AIG math lesson plans, and they tagged all of their lessons with IRP. So if you actually go into Schoolnet and search IRP, you will see these lesson plans, and I'll show you in just a minute. Another way to search for AIG resources is AIG, and then use your subject grade filters. Again, there's a large section of ELA lesson plans and units based for AIG, so those are in Schoolnet. And then I also am going to show you that Schoolnet has a student workspaces section for portfolios of student work. And this is great because a lot of times I used to be an AIG teacher when I was in the classroom for social studies. So I was AIG certified. So I had those students come into my classroom, and a lot of times we'd have students that were from a different district. And the nice thing is that Schoolnet would follow with the student. So it follows with the student for different years and also follows with different districts because each district creates their own criteria for AIG. And it's based on a lot of times on student work samples. You have to keep student work samples for their portfolio. So Schoolnet does have this workspaces section where you could upload student work, and it will be visible to their teachers in the years coming. So that way they have like this building portfolio of work. So we're going to take a second to show you that. So I'm going to go in and under my instructional materials again on the left side. I'm going to unselect my subjects because I had that selected, and I'm just going to do IRP first. And I can see there's like 63 lesson plans and 56 resources, and they're all elementary math. so specific to AIG. And then if I just do a generic search just for AIG, and then if I filter it down, especially in ELA, there were some AIG units for here. So I can go in and look at these lesson plans. See, that's an actual document that downloads. And this is for a GTN, which is the Governor's Teachers Network, the program that we had a few years ago. And so where they developed these lesson plans. This one is about Hatchet, the novel. I love that. That was one of my favorite novels to read with kids. But anyway, so these resources are here. And again, you can save them to your favorites. And then if you go under instructional materials and you go to where it says My Materials, you'll see all the resources that you've saved in Schoolnet. All right, I want to show you that workspaces. So student workspaces is actually under the classroom module on the left side, and I can click on student workspaces. And you will choose your course, and you will see your students load, and you will have to create a workspace for them. Schoolnet does not create one automatically. You have to create one for them. And then you'll be able to upload work samples and as well as add notes to the work samples that you upload. And then that will be visible for, you can see past years. And then you can also look by a student's name as well. Any questions about AIG resources? All right. We're going to keep on. We are just moving right along here on this afternoon. All right, the next group I'm going to talk about are global education resources. So quick poll, raise your hand in the attendee panel if you have heard of the Global Educator Digital Badge. So I'm going to see if I got one hand up. Anybody else besides Robert heard of the Global Educator Digital Badge program? All right. So I'm going to give a 30-second elevator speech about what that is. But it is actually still a current ongoing program where teachers can follow a process to actually get a micro-credential and be recognized by the state as a global educator. And they earn this badge through a lot of PD about interconnecting interdisciplinary study with global connections. And then they also have to submit a project, and lots of times the project is an instructional unit that contains 4 to 6 lesson plans, and all of those lesson plans go into Schoolnet. So you will find there's well over 300 of these in Schoolnet, and we've also been migrating them over to Go Open NC, which I will show you in a minute. And the reason why we've been moving them over to Go Open NC is because Go Open NC allows you to remix them, which is a really cool, easy way to say, for example, you notice one of the lesson plans is great, but maybe you have a large population of EL learners in your classroom and you need to give them some graphic organizers or other methods of support. You could remix and make a copy of that lesson and then just add the things in there that your learners need to be successful. I love that because a lot of times, I'm showing my age now, but I used to make those really complicated Jeopardy PowerPoint, and like it would take me hours to make a Jeopardy PowerPoint. So anytime I don't have to start from scratch anymore, I'm real excited. So that's, I guess, my biggest thing about Go Open and See, and also finding lessons in Schoolnet is that there's no reason anymore to start from scratch. There's nothing, because you can always find something and then take it and make it better or make it more relevant for your learners that you have in your particular classroom at this time. All right, so that was my elevator speech. Now let's go look at these. So I'm going to go back into my instructional materials, and I'm going to clear out any filters from my last search there a few minutes ago. And I'm just going to type in GEDB, and I'm going to be able to see those materials in Schoolnet. I see a little bit more than you will actually see, and that is because I see the pending ones, which are people that are still in the process right now of getting their global education digital badge. And so I see their pending materials, which haven't been reviewed yet and approved. So that's why you're looking at my screen, you're like, wow, Pam has a lot more than I do. That's because I see the pending materials yet that haven't been finalized. So I'm just going to go over to that Go Open NC tab because I want to show you that remix tool that I talked about. All right, so I'm going to look at this one for biotechnology, and I'm just going to go view it on Go Open NC. And really cool right there, I have that remix button, right? So what that does is it just makes a copy of this lesson. And then I can add whatever supports I need to it. So maybe I know of a better video than what this resource has. I can click on remix and add my own video in there, but versus the video that this teacher found. The nice thing about this is when I click on remix, it asks me why I'm remixing. So maybe I could say something like, I want to support my EL learners. The nice thing is not only when you are finished, creating your supports or your modifications, it saves that version of the remix too. So maybe someone else will come here and see this lesson and be like, oh, this is great, but I really need something for my EL learners. Well, if you just remixed it and added supports for EL learners, then they have almost like a 95% match of what they need versus, coming in and searching and you find, 80% of what you need. So remixing is great, and it's a very valuable tool for educators to be able to share and not have to pay like the teachers pay teachers. I say go open and see, and everything is free, right? So free is better. All right. Looking to see if there's any questions about global education. If I interested you, I would encourage you to look at DPI's website, and you can learn more about the Global Educator digital batch program and see if you're interested in applying for it as well and getting started in the process and all the requirements. We're going to go back. And then the next thing we're going to talk about is our resources for littles. So Schoolnet, a lot of times people think of it as an assessment platform, and they're like, oh, this is great assessment instructions, right? Well, there's also all these things in here for littles too. So for our K2 students, there are assessment items as well as instructional resources. Many of these assessment items are picture-based or very visual, and Schoolnet even has oral reading passages as well. I actually did a webinar in April of last year called Schoolnet for Littles, where I really talked about some different instructional strategies because it's not going to look the same. You're not going to give kindergartners a test code and say, okay, kids, log into Schoolnet and enter this test code and take an assessment. That's just not going to work with little ones. But there are some great strategies for thinking about centers or even whole group instruction if you have a smart board or some way to be interactive and project some Schoolnet questions. There's some great things that you could be doing in your classroom if you want to use Schoolnet. So I've linked that recording in here, so feel free to watch that. I am going to show you where those oral reading passages are because I think it's a very timely subject because we are all thinking about what are some different ways that maybe we could have some blended learning or online resources. And, this applies to our K2 students as well, who may not be quite ready for that independence. So I'm going to go into Schoolnet, and I'm going to go down under assessments on the left side. And I'm going to go under items, rubrics, and passages and click on find. And I want to look for passages and linked items. Again, give that screen a second to load. And I'm just going to go in and select kindergarten. And all of our read aloud oral passages are by one publisher, and that is Equella. So I'm going to go right here where it says search by publisher, and it remembers because I did this before in the webinar this morning. So I'm going to search for that particular passage or publisher, sorry, and it's going to bring up, there's still 1,000 of them, so there's still plenty of them. And I'm just going to go look at the green box. So I click on view passage details, and it's going to load in a new screen. And I can see this passage is read aloud. You can see the teacher instructions, right? And then there's questions linked to this particular passage. So I'm just going to go and I'm going to add this to a test. And I'm going to create a new test with these items, because what I'm really looking for is I'm going to be generating a test booklet that we can use. So I'm just going to call this K sample 2. And we're just going to call this English language literature, English language arts, generate test. And so, when we're thinking about online blended learning and Schoolnet, one thing to think about is that you want to make sure your tests are accessible, right? So with blended learning, you still have students that have IEPs, you still have students that have 504s. So online testing in Schoolnet does have those accommodation support available for read aloud, for extended time, for line item masking, as well as color contrast. So you can be assured that even though you're assigning something for online work, you're still being equitable and meeting the students' needs for accommodations. So you can even accommodate other things as well. So if someone has reduced answer choices, you can go in here and modify a test for that. But since this is kindergarten, if I wanted to go in here, I can click on any one of these answer choices and I have a full text editor. So if I wanted to maybe add pictures for my answer choices, I can do that. But I'm not too concerned about that at this moment, but I'm going to click on return to test details. And on those test details, I now have under test actions, I can go ahead and look for a student test booklet. And then I also would want to make sure that I do the teacher instructions because this particular test had that oral read aloud passage, right? So now I have, it's going to take a second, it's going to download, and let me go ahead and download the booklet as well. And so now I have these PDFs that I could print, I could put in a Google Classroom, I could, share them, some people have like a snow bag or hurricane bag of lessons, or even subs lessons for substitutes. You could use all of these things in Schoolnet to help you prepare for those options, right? So now if by giving the teacher instructions here with the passage and then the student, right? So now listen to this sentence, how many syllables are in the word bulletin, right? So a parent or a guardian could go over this with their child as part of like a blended learning or online experience if needed. All right, any questions about that? All right, we have one more topic to go over. So be thinking about what your general questions are, anything you wanted to know about Schoolnet and are afraid to ask, you getting those ready. The last thing we're going to talk about is the released item banks. So we do have a specific item bank in Schoolnet, similar to the CTE item bank I already showed you, that has just the released EOC, EOG, and NCFE items. So you can use this bank to quickly create a review assessment or an opening activity for your students. I know some teachers that will take one of these questions a day and use it as like their bell ringer or opening instructions, because usually there's 30 to 40, sometimes even 50 items on a released form for a test. So one a day, we're already almost getting in that point in that time range. It's hard to believe it's mid-March already. One note I do have here at the bottom, there are new released forms for 3A ELA as well as Math 2 that cannot be added at the state level to Schoolnet due to the copyright restrictions on the reading passages. So when those passages, when licensing was negotiated with the authors, they would not allow us to be able to put those reading passages into another testing platform outside of NC Test. So due to that, we will not be able to add those at the state level. So just want to let you know, if you're looking specifically for the new ELA reading released items, unfortunately, we cannot have those in Schoolnet at the state level. All right, so for everybody else, let's go ahead and show that. So I'm going to close out here, and I'm going to go down over on the left side again under assessments, and I'm going to go under to that briefcase where it says item banks. And I'm going to go in and look for that NCDPI_released bank. And I'm going to use my filters again. So maybe if I was looking for 3rd grade, I know we had a 3rd grade teacher on with us right now. And maybe I'm just going to go in and look for math. So the only math items for 3rd grade in this item bank are your released items. So it makes it really easy to find them, because you're just going to go look for your subject and your grade level, and those are your released items. I will tell you the released ELA items from the previous version of the test are still in here. So there are still ELA items in here. They're just not the new released items. But they still might be worth at least investigating for practice, right? Just to let you know. So I can just go in here and select some of these items and follow the same steps that I just took for the kindergarten assessment to create a test with those items. Any questions about released items? All right. So that brings me to our general questions. So those are some of my favorite things that were in Schoolnet, and hopefully at least one of them was something that you didn't know was in Schoolnet. But I would love to hear from you if there's any general questions you have about how to do something in Schoolnet, or if there was any of those items that you are going to go back and look through and hopefully use with your students, or in thinking about how you can use Schoolnet in the future. I'd love for you to share if there's anything that you can't wait to go back and talk about. All right. One last thing, I do want to point out we have a Google site, and so that is great resources as well as a webinar archive. for all of the webinars. We have 2 years worth of Schoolnet webinars archived on our Google site. So please go back through and look at some of those resources. Erin has a question, so I'm going to come in and look for yours. All right, so we're looking for reading passages on a specific standard, writing reading passages that focus on 3rd grade RI 8. All right, so you will find in Schoolnet that our reading passages are reading passages, right? So just kind of like our end of year test, you'll have one reading passage and you'll have a bunch of questions associated to it. And it's the questions that are associated to the standards more so than the passages, right? Because one passage could have multiple questions that reflect multiple standards. So let me show you the easiest way that I know to do that. And so that is to go into our item banks, or sorry, go under items, rubrics, and passages, find, and we're going to go for passages and linked items. And thank you, Erin. I love that you gave me a specific standard because I'm going to go in here and first I'm going to clear all my filters to make sure nothing was left from the last time I searched. And I'm just going to go into my standards. So here's a little helpful hint. You don't have to worry about grade level or subject area if you're going to do search by standards because your standards has your grade level and subject area in it. So I'm just going to go click on into my 3rd grade. And I'm going to go down into RI 8. All right. And save. And then at the top, I'm going to want to make sure that I've got find and group items by passage. That's going to group all my passages and items together. And it's going to show me by the ones that have the most questions for that particular standard. Right? So for this particular one, there are 9. And this particular passage is in Spanish. So another thing we can do is go under here in our question language and we can go in and search English. So unless you're looking for Spanish passages, there we go. All right, so now we have just the English, and there's 9 matching items. And so this particular passage has 9 questions, and they should all be aligned to RI 3.8. And so that's the easiest way to search. So that way you know that your passages are going to be sorted by the number of linked items, and it's going to show them most to the least, right? So this particular passage has 9 questions that are aligned to that particular standard. All right, so hopefully that was helpful, Erin. Any other questions? I saw Caroline is looking forward to checking out Go Open and See for resources. So yay, I'm excited about that. All right. So I do want to say thank you for joining, and I hope you have a great afternoon. We'll give you a few minutes back in your day, and we wish you well. And thank you, Stacy, for joining us and helping out.
Oh, you're welcome. I had to sneeze before I unmuted my microphone. I don't know if it's pollen or what going on here, but this was really informative. I thought, you know, I wasn't sure what to expect from the title, but I love that it was all of these little tidbits that I learned so much about. So nice afternoon.
Absolutely, yes. All right, have a great afternoon, everyone.